Hi everyone, and thanks for being with me again. Want to talk about defence, not the fence, not the thing you put around a home or keep children out from falling into swimming pools. I want to talk about defence, which kind of sounds like a French word saying defence. So we'll talk about defence. So the reason why I want to talk about it is that it came up this week because apparently Richard Marles has been to a conference in Singapore, which is a defence conference, and had a conversation with Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth, for those of you that don't know, is the drunken fool who was on a weekend TV program on Fox News, and because of his experience also serving in the army, was promoted to the top job in America, running the largest organisation in the world. And why wouldn't you put someone with those credentials at the top of that particular job? Well, you would if you're Trump, because you're impressed by their TV performance. So we have this dude telling us now, this man with any real credibility whatsoever, having conversations with Richard Marles about where we should be in terms of how much money we should pay for defence. Now, he's obviously forgotten about the billions of dollars that we're paying at the moment for a whole bunch of ships or submarines that will probably never ever be delivered. And there's some cruisers and some other vessels too that won't be here till the year 30,050. So we're waiting for stuff to come. We're spending money. We're kind of doing what we're told. The disappointing thing for me is that we're doing what we're told based on primarily the Liberal Party's move to ingratiate themselves with the United States, leaving France behind in terms of the subs, moving over to the US and the UK. So we are now taking advice from a TV host about how we should be running our country's defence. Now, I personally couldn't give a shit because basically it is unlikely, I think. Now look, I'm not an expert in any of this. In fact, I've said before, I'm actually not an expert in anything. I just have a lot to say about many subjects. But in this particular instance, I don't think that China is necessarily a great threat to us. Now, why would they be? They had, up until recently, the largest growing middle class on this planet. Millions and millions of people found their way out of poverty into the middle class because of America's desire, primarily, to use their labour in order to make products to sell to the United States. But they also, in that process, were able to build one of the largest militaries in the world, competing with the United States. And of course, the United States don't like that idea, that someone else can be competing with them. Hence the reasons why we have tariffs, hence the reasons why we have a trade war, hence the reasons why the United States and everybody else on this planet seems to worry about China. And I wonder whether we need to, instead of worrying about China, we should do what we can, not necessarily to ingratiate ourselves with them, but certainly to understand where they're coming from and to perhaps change our attitude towards them so we're not poking them all the time, like the United States does. The United States pokes them to the point whereby I think the United States would be delighted for China to take over Taiwan so it could escalate into some sort of conflict, which we would have to be dragged into. And I need to remind you that when we get dragged into a conflict, such as, I'll just name a few, Vietnam, terrible disaster that was, Iraq, also another big disaster, Afghanistan, another big disaster. So whenever we get dragged into these American promoted sort of propaganda wars, we lose people. We have not, even the bloody British during the First World War and, following them into the Second World War, even though Japan did try to bomb us, admittedly. We follow all these people. Now, I think the time should come where we make our own decisions about what is in our best interest and don't rely on other people, other bullies such as Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump, to tell us how we should be governing our country and what amount of monies we should be spending. When I think of how much money they spend in the military in the United States, and I think, why? Imagine for a moment if you use that money for good, to propagate good ideas, to educate people, to make sure that people didn't live in poverty, all that sort of stuff. The United States would be a fabulous country to live in, but it doesn't. And how many people in the United States depend on the manufacture of military arms and goods from the US and sell it across the world, is amazing. Make billions of dollars from it. It's an industry. In Australia, we don't have that same sort of industry. What we do have is a sense of reasonableness and a sense of just letting get things done and not worry too much about any impending problem such as a war, which is most unlikely. So, given I've said that, Andrew Bolt had an interesting take on all of this. And so I'll play you what he has to say, because, of course, Andrew is also, like myself, an expert in this particular area, and he definitely knows what he's talking about here. And so he refers to this as sort of like a US are giving us a warning call, wake-up call. I don't know whether anybody could rely too much on the US in terms of security information right at this particular point in time, a la Ukraine. But let's see what Bolt says.
Warned the Albanese government on Saturday it's running out of time. We have to spend a lot more on our defence very fast. That warning came from US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth in Singapore at the Shangri-La Security Dialogue. That's Asia's top defence summit. Hegseth said there that China's massive military build-up was a clear and present danger.
China seeks to become a hegemonic power in Asia, no doubt. It hopes to dominate and control too many parts of this vibrant and vital region. There's no reason to sugarcoat it. The threat China poses is real, and it could be imminent. We hope not, but it certainly could be. NATO members are pledging to spend 5% of their GDP on defense, even Germany. So it doesn't make sense for countries in Europe to do that while key allies in Asia spend less on defense in the face of an even more formidable threat.
Now, our Defence Minister Richard Marles was there and told Hegseth in a side meeting that as for the China threat, he agreed with him.
We have seen the biggest conventional military build-up in the world since the end of the Second World War being undertaken by China.
Now, Hegseth then privately told Marles that Australia had to at least lift its defence spending from 2% of GDP to, all right, not 5% right now, but at least 3.5% very fast. And again, Marles seemed sympathetic.
We are very much up for the conversation, and what I made clear is that this is a conversation that we are very willing to have, and it's one that we're having.
But back home, there was Anthony Albanese. He doesn't want to spend anything like that and was almost contemptuous today of America's request.
What you should do in defence is decide what you need, your capability, and then provide for it. That's what my government's doing, investing in our capability and investing in our relationships. That's what we are doing. That's what we will continue to do.
Joining me is the country's top foreign.
So I'm not going to play the Australians version of that. I forget the name of the guy that he had on next, who's just a hawk, who wants us to get into a fight with China. I guess that's the point. And and Albanese is right. Sometimes the best way to avoid a war is to have good relationships with your neighbours. If you're yelling and screaming at the person over the fence, and you're throwing rocks at their house, there's a good chance they'll throw rocks back. But if you get to know them and understand who they are and appreciate the issues that they have and maybe on occasions try to help them solve those particular problems, then there is less likely for them to fight back. But people like Andrew Bolt and people at Sky News and other media commentators, including Peter Credlin, who also did a session on all of this, they just want us to acquiesce to the United States, do what the United States tell us to do, and then to decide what to do after that. And I think the best thing that we can do is to do nothing and have a good relationship with Chinese people, as we need to do with all our Asian friends, and then there is less likely, particularly if we're trading appropriately, if we've got good diplomatic relationships, there is less likely of there to be conflict. I'd be interested to know what the rest of you think. Just remember to subscribe to my channel, ring the bell for further notifications. And in the meantime, take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, be safe.